Hello again. In this video, it's really a quick video that's an update to what I was talking about in a previous video where I was going over the various things in the menu on the job budgets estimates worksheet about various things in the menu, and especially about how you can apply a markup percent when you're dealing with setting a contract type. And I have an update about that has to do with fixed price contracts and something called allowances that you set. So let's scroll down, look at this unit measure here, and find something that's for an allowance, like the front door. Notice that this has been budgeted at $1,500. In my next videos, I'm going to be talking more about contract price and allowances, and how you set allowances. You call something an allowance when it's an amount that you're going to tell your customer they can spend for that, and if they go over, you're going to charge them for the overages, maybe with a market percent, etc. But when you give them the original allowance report, and by the way, this budget hasn't been all updated with new numbers, so it has a low amount, and I removed the zero lines. I just started a brand new budget from the master, and I haven't done anything to all these. This just brought in master things. Excuse me, I've been getting over a little cold while I'm doing this, so I keep having my throat do things. But you can see this is an allowance. It's at $1,500, etc. And let's go back out of that for a second. And we also have, I think, under appliances, let's go jump down here. Total appliance package is set as an allowance, and I believe it brought in some items behind it. So when and we're going to, like I said, have more videos that really talk about these allowances. But when you do the allowances over here in the menu, and you do an allowances worksheet and agreement, it's going to show, when you print the report, it's going to show the budgeted amount, because we need to tell the customer or home buyer what they can spend, not at the marked up amount. But we can say that if there's overages, we want to apply a certain percent to these, etc. Since we're going to be using 25% for the rest of our contract, I'll change that real quick. And if we want to apply, if they go under the allowance, we want to give them credit for a certain percent. So this is sort of like the miniature little markup percent for their overages and unders on allowances. But notice that these are at the budget total, so that when you give them, after I go ahead and submit this, when you give your home buyer an allowance agreement, it's showing those budgeted amounts, because we don't want to show them some marked up amount that they decide they can go spend. And that's always sort of bugged me, that we do this whole markup percent and add a markup percent when we have a fixed price, and it ends up landing in the allowance things. And I want to talk about that for a minute, about how I've added a feature that will help take care of that. Basically, it's going to apply the markup to all non-allowance lines at a little higher percent, and then leave the allowance lines at 0% for a markup. And this is brand new, and it's been bugging me for years. It's just great how I have to change my videos, but my previous video is showing just one thing on it, and it does pop up and say, look at this next update about this. And so we were talking about set price and contract type there. So let's take a look at that for a minute. We're going to decide to call this a fixed price job. And like I said, it's little bitty amounts that don't pay any attention to that. That doesn't have much to do with what we're talking about. And because I did fixed price, CHS based on the budget amount and based on a 20% that I typed in for my desired profit percent, and you can pause this and read about the difference between gross profit percent and a markup percent, which I mentioned in the previous video. But it's suggesting this 328, 285.50. So let's just decide we're actually going to charge them $330,000 for this. We're going to set the price at that. It's going to do some recalculation down here to show us that minus the budget, what our expected profit is, etc., which is a little higher than the 20% because we did that. But what I'd like to show you, because I marked this as fixed contract, that when I close this, I am actually getting a pop-up that says this is marked as fixed contract, but the contract price is more than $2 different than the marked up amount. And actually we haven't applied any markup, so it's catching that. And this is because when you print your job budget reports for a fixed price contract, you probably only want to show them their marked up columns. But if we mark up the whole thing, then those allowance lines on that budget will show the marked up amount. And I have now put in a tool to apply a calculated markup, but I've added a tool to it to take care of your allowances if that's what you like. When I do yes, open it, it will be the same as over here in the menu. When you drop down, it says apply markup or tax. When you drop down, it'll say apply markups. It's going to open the same window that you could from the menu, but it's detected that I've changed this to a fixed price and that I should probably get my marked up column to match my price. So I'm going to click yes, open it. And you're going to see our contract price over here. Here's just a simple place just to put whatever random markup percent you want and mark it up. Do your markup column if you like, but most often you're probably dealing with this screen when you're on a fixed price. So here's your price, here's your budgeted costs. Now CHS is calculating something with a lot of decimals, so we can try to get as close as possible to the market price, to the contract price when we apply this markup, but we're always off a couple of pennies. We just can't take care of that because it's just so much rounding going on in all this calculation. And if I do this one that's always been there to change the markup percent on all budgeted costs, it's also going to change it on those allowance items. We're going to come back here in just a second and see what this new button that I have here that has CHS calculate and apply a markup percent based on the contract price and the budgeted costs that are not allowances. But let's just apply this one real quick. It asks me if it's okay. It says okay. Once you close this, the budget worksheet will recalculate. So I'm going to close this. It's refreshing itself, and now you see that markup percent sort of rounded. We got real lucky that it's exactly the amount of the contract price when we see the marked up amounts. But you'll notice that our little allowance items, that front door, is now showing marked up. So if you do that budget report and you do all budget reports, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, or we already did, but about setting up different styles. But when you're doing a fixed, you're probably giving them a marked up with buyer notes. And I probably don't have any, who knows what I have here because I just made a fast budget. But so they come down and they see that, let's get down here to those appliances, for example. They see that the amount they're seeing here on their budgeted thing is that marked up amount, which might be a little bit confusing to them. This is a percent of the sales, not the marked up. You probably want them to see the actual amount they can spend when you give them a budget report. So let's close this and let's go back to apply the markup or tax and markup budget, and we'll get that same window we had open a minute ago. And there's another thing here that you can click that's going to take care of that issue. It says, note that CHS will update the markup percent on all allowance records to 0. And the markup percent applied to all the other budget records will be higher than the calculated markup percent on this window. This calculated markup percent that we're showing here behind the scenes, CHS is going to do a little math and just apply the markup percent to all the ones that are not allowances. And after the update is done in the markup window, the total of the marked up column should be within pennies of your contract price. It's asking if it's okay to do that. I'm going to do OK update. It tells me to please close the window and check the total of the markup column, etc., to see if it's close to the price. Now let it refresh. And again, sometimes it will be a penny or two different than the price just because of all the rounding and the long percent. But what I'd like you to know notice is that this still is basically totaling to our contract price, but this has a 0% in it for the front door. The appliances that were also an allowance have a 0% in it. This cabinets is an allowance, has a 0%. And this markup percent that's going on is a little higher than that one that was showing when we showed the calculated amount. If you look at that about markup budget again, This is just calculated based on the contract price and budgeted costs and not taking into account allowances. So CHS did some math behind and figured out what little bit of a higher percent markup we need to add to all the lines that are not allowances, so that when you do a budget report, and we continue to the budget reports, and we do this, let's just do with buyer notes, marked up only. And let's get down to that 5,500 for appliances again. Notice that it says 5,500, and the 5505 is a cost code, 5,500, instead of that higher marked up amount, which would make better sense to the home buyers, but we're still coming down within a penny of what the price is that we're showing here on this budget. And you'll just have to explain that's just a little bit of rounding, you know, to make that, to get your detail. You can't have all these, you know, 8 decimal points here. You'll have just a really messy looking report to get that as exact as we can. So, Angela, the one other thing you'll notice is that CHS has applied that markup percent just to sort of stored it so that you can actually see it over here when we did that change. So I wanted to let you know about that feature. I think there's some builders that have wrestled with that and maybe had to go through their math and change all these. On the markup budget window, we did have, if needed, after markup of budgets, click this to set the allowance markups to 0. But then when we did that, our markup column wouldn't total, and then you might decide you're having to go through and figure out some math itself, and you figure out you really need to put 27.82% in all the ones that aren't, you know, if you do your own math of all of that without the allowances, and you put that in and mark it all up, and then you set those allowance ones to 0. But now CHS will do that for you, and I think that will probably help everybody a lot. And I just wanted to show you that. Thanks for watching.